Hey, it's Ronnie here. So today I'm going to talk about how to smash your analysing argument stack and your essay as well for the exam. So it's going to be a little bit of a longer clip, so bear with me, but it's just a crash course on what you need to know, what you need to avoid, and how to set yourself up for success. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to look at are the key skills that you're going to be tested on and assessed on essentially. So what are your teachers actually looking for? Well, the first thing they're going to be looking for is your ability to identify the author's argument and how it develops. Okay, so it's being able to say it is sequenced in a way where it's like, this is the opening, this is the body, and this is the closing. Okay, so we'll talk about all of that a little bit later. You need to analyze the evidence that has been used and back it up. What does it mean? Explain how language positions an audience to respond in a particular way. So think, feel, and act. Explain and show how arguments and language work together. They're not separate. Language helps form an argument. You need to consider the author's identity, context, and their audience. Why are they writing it? What is their purpose? And of course, do not forget to talk about the visual. Okay, not on its own, not in the introduction. How does it complement an argument? Okay, so one thing that we are going to start off with first, common mistakes that students make. So these are the traps, so try to avoid them. Do not ignore the background information. That is essential detail. Don't summarize the text and the article. You need to analyze it. Don't just tell me what it's about. I want to know how an argument is developed. Don't miss techniques. It's not about listing and identifying techniques. It's about identifying argument and analyzing it. Avoid being vague about the audience and the author intent. So you don't want to say, makes the audience want to read on. That's never the intent. Don't treat the image as its own separate thing. Okay, the image is there to play a part in complementing an argument. And not understanding the issue itself doesn't help in your actual analysis. So you need to have a bit of an understanding of that issue. For the exam, you're provided that in the background information. For your SAC, you've been working on a particular issue, so you should have an understanding. Okay, background information is your cheat sheet. Okay, that's the next point. So that little box of context that you get at the start of the SAC, gold, absolute gold. Why? Because it tells you what the issue is. Where has the piece been published? So that will allow you to understand what the audience values are and the author's connection to the issue. Do they have a vested interest in that? So that's really important, and that helps you to shape your introduction and really help that. Step number 4, how to nail your introduction. Bang. So keep it simple, clear, and no more than 3 sentences. No less, no more. 3 simple sentences. Number 1, your context statement. This shows that you know the issue. Be specific, not vague. Number 2, you need to show that you understand the details of the text. Who wrote it? Where did they write it? What is the title? What is the contention? Okay. And number 3, the audience and the intention. Who's being targeted and why? Okay, so that is your sort of, in terms of what the author wants to achieve, who is it aiming it towards and why? What do they want them to do? Okay, you don't need to include tone, you don't need to include any techniques, you don't need to include the visual, just those 3 sentences. Context, details, audience and intention. Simple. So how do you structure your analysis? Well, when you structure your analysis, you need to think of the article in 3 parts. Okay, the opening, which introduces the issue, sets the contention usually, engages a bit with the audience, sets them up for what they're going to be reading. Then you have the body, which develops the arguments, and it's usually through facts and logic, emotion, rebuttals, that sort of detail is in there. There's going to be more than a couple of sections in there. So you'll have probably 2 to 3 sections in the body, depending on the length of the article. And then you have the closing. This is the end of the article, and this is usually where there is a close call for action. It provides a solution, and it just drives home the point that the writer is making. So your paragraph should follow the what, how, why formula. What's being argued? How is language being used to make that point clear? That's where you put in your evidence, and that's where you make your subtle inclusion of the language features of the text. And then finally, why is it persuasive for this particular audience? How does it appeal to their values? So you're looking at 2 to 3 what, how, whys per paragraph, and there you will connect the visual with the argument that is suited for that particular visual. So if the visual is sort of representing something that is said within the article, that's where you include the visual. Okay, it's never a separate chunk on its own. Now, the next thing that I'm going to talk about are the audience. So when you say audience, don't just write the general public. Sometimes it is that, but otherwise that's a little bit too broad. Instead, think about who the stakeholders actually are. And stakeholders are those people that do have some sort of interest within the topic themselves. They are either affected by it, or they could do something by it, or, they're a part of a community that will be impacted. So who will the stakeholders be, and how are they being positioned to respond? Okay, so when you're looking at the stakeholders, you need to connect the argument to their views, values, and beliefs, okay? And what the writer wants them to do in terms of think, feel, act, okay? So those things need to be considered. They're being asked to do something. What is it that they're being asked to do in terms of the argument that's being presented? Next, we have visuals. Visuals are a part of the argument. They're not a separate paragraph on their own, okay? You shouldn't include them in your introduction because, remember, you are analysing argument. Okay, and that is what needs to be the focus of your introduction, whereas a visual is a part of the how. Okay, so the how is a connection to the visual. The visual supports an argument, so it complements an argument. How does it do that? Describe it in a bit of detail, analyze its features and how it connects to what the argument is. And that is what you should do for your visual. Don't just describe, but how does it connect and reinforce the writer's point? Okay, always link it back to what is said in the text. Another thing that we talk about a lot is tone, but tone is never a singular thing in a piece of persuasive text. Tone changes throughout. So you'll find that with tone, you shouldn't really include it in your introduction. And you'll see that in the examiner's report where, it's suggested that the tone shifts throughout. And that's how you should talk about it, how it shifts, what language is used to show that tonal shift, and why that's important in engaging with the audience. So mention it only when it signals a shift in argument and how it persuades the audience in that way. So some advice for writing: don't list techniques, show how language builds an argument. Use quotes with purpose. Don't just include them for the sake of it. Be selective with evidence. You do not need to cover every little detail. Okay, you choose the best evidence to support that argument. So you're looking at about 2 to 3 what, how, whys per paragraph. Look at the piece holistically. Link it back to earlier points and re-emerge in the conclusion. So your final concluding paragraph. Always ask, what's the writer's vested interest? Because sometimes they have a vested interest and it is in their power to talk about that. Okay, they're going to get something out of it. What not to write. Avoid these dead end lines. Okay, so the issue has been discussed in the media. The image makes the reader think visually. It appeals to the reader's emotions and they feel an emotion. Well, what emotion and how? And finally, the question makes the reader question what's being said. Well, what's the question? Why are they questioning it, etc.? Go into specific detail. My favorite, makes it stick in the reader's head. That's never an intention. So avoid saying those statements. So how are you going to prepare? Research the issue that is being studied. But if you're doing the exam, the information is in the background info, okay? Think about stakeholders and their values when you're reading the text. Who are the stakeholders? What do they value? What do they want to see happen? Practice time annotation, so your reading time that you'll get, and then how to use the beginning of your writing time to effectively annotate your text. Practice writing specific context statements for your issue, okay? Whatever it is, vary it up depending on what your issue is. Read high-scoring sample essays and how they do that, how structure, and change it up a little bit. Swap essays with friends and study buddies and get some feedback on that. Use the rubrics available to you and the expected qualities for the exam. Do timed practices as well, within like 60 minutes, because roughly that's what you're looking at for the exam, even less. Okay, so ways to say the author's intent and what he does. Here's some vocab boosting for you. You can say outlines, highlights, emphasizes, challenges, provokes, reassures, positions, compels, illustrates, reinforces, implies, validates, conveys, articulates. There's so many analytical verbs. Use as many as you want, okay? But make sure you use them correctly. The same with tone words. Don't just chuck in a tone word and say that the writer shifts their tone to being more emotional. What emotion? What are we feeling? Be specific and be correct. Always back it up with a quote. Okay, so to sum it up, use the background info as your guide, analyze arguments with what, how, why, be audience specific with stakeholders, link the visual to the argument, avoid vague nothing statements, practice with real issues before the SAC. Follow these steps. You'll go into the SAC with clarity, structure, confidence, and make sure that you follow ronniesramblings.com. Okay, go onto my website, have a look. I've got some detailed examples and a little bit more detail as to how to approach this particular section of the area of study in VCE English Units 2, Units 4, and the exam. Good luck.